This is the Rich Dad Radio Show. The good news and bad news about money. Here's Robert Kiyosaki.
Hello. This is Robert Kiyosaki, the Rich Dad Radio Show. The good news and bad news about money. And once again, we broadcast from beautiful downtown, Old Town, Scottsdale, Arizona, where it's either heaven or hell. And right now it is heaven. The weather is perfect. So all of you guys out there freezing, you know what's off? Think of Scottsdale or Hawaii, because these places are beautiful right now. So today we have a very important program, as all of our programs are. Our guest today is Brett McCabe. He's the author of the Mindside Manifesto, the urgency to create a competitive mindset. And I think that is so important today because I meet so many people, young and old, not picking on millennials, everybody likes to do, but I meet so many people who have lost a competitive edge. The world has changed and people are being left behind. Everybody talks about the gap between the rich and the poor and let's blame it on the rich. But the world doesn't change unless you change. So again, Brett McCabe is the Mindside Manifesto, the urgency to create a competitive mindset. Very important program. Now, I want to commend Brett on one big thing. It's a matter of character. When I asked Sarah, I said, why is Brett on our program? And she said, because he retweets a lot of what I say, Robert Kiyosaki says. And I said, that's a sign of character. What that means here is that when I was in the U.S. Marine Corps and at the academy, we're always taught to acknowledge source. Where did you get the information from? Where did you get that bit of wisdom from? And a lot of people are so insecure, they want to claim, well, I thought of it, it's mine, and all this. So they claim jump somebody else's idea. So when Sarah said to me, this guy, Brett McCabe, he retweets exactly what I say, Robert Kiyosaki says. I said, that is a sign of character. And that's what we're talking about today, because the character, not only of the American people, but all over the world, has gotten very weak, wishy-washy, like oatmeal. They've lost their internal strength. So Brett McCabe, the Mindside Manifesto is his book, The Urgency to Create a Competitive Mindset, a very important program because the world is changing. And either you're either kicking butt or you're getting your butt kicked. That's the way I look at life here. So it's a very important program, especially for anybody out there who's a wimp, who is so sick and tired of getting their butt kicked. Look, either you're kicking butt or you're getting your butt kicked. That's life. Any comments, Ken?
Well, here's why I'm so excited to talk to Brett, because he was an athlete and then he became a psychologist and he worked with various organizations, but he really wanted to combine his love of psychology with sports, and he's done that. And what he does is he works with, as he says, competitors. He helps competitors break free of their patterns of struggle to create winning solutions on their playing field. So we're not actually just talking about athletes. This is also for the business people, for the entrepreneurs, because as we all know, the one thing that gets in our way often is our mind, our thoughts, our emotions, and how do we keep those in check so that we do have the success that we want. So this is going to be a great show on how to handle the mindsets that hold you back and how do you create your own success in your own playing field. So welcome, Brett, to the show. Wonderful to have you here.
So, Brett, would you mind giving us a little bit of background on how did you come to write this book, The Mindside Manifesto, the urgency to create a competitive mindset? And all you wimps out there, listen up.
Yeah, all the wimps. Thank you. And you know what? It's a great honor to be here. But you're exactly right about the wimps, because I was, for a long time, I was a mental wimp. I played baseball at LSU, and I want to thank you for the comments about my character. That's a reflection of my parents. I had the greatest parents in the world. My dad was military. I grew up in a military family, and integrity was everything, and how you carry yourself. And you leave the world a better place when you leave a building, an office, a relationship, anything. You leave people better. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
I was a wimp mentally. I had the ability, but I was soft, and I knew that. But I was always did things the right way, and my mindset is, if I did it the right way, it would work out. What I realized was I had to do something else, and I lived my life for so long with this idea that if I did everything right and I didn't mess up, then I would be successful. And unfortunately, what happened was I ended up finding myself frustrated a lot. I was frustrated with the fact that I wasn't having success. I was envious of my friends, my teammates, my colleagues. And people would look at me and say, well, you do everything right. You've got good grades. You treat people with respect. It's going to happen. But what had to happen was I had to put my butt on the line. I had to be willing to put myself out there and be vulnerable. I had to get rid of the if-then statements. And through my playing career at LSU, where we won a couple national titles, I had to put it on the line and say, either I'm going to fail or I'm going to succeed. There's no more safety net.
What sport did you play, by the way?
I was a baseball player. And I was a pitcher. Yep. And we were a national championship team. I'd won 2 national titles while I was there. And I wanted to play worse than anything else. And I had some injuries. I had some adversity. But I was so soft. I was like a marshmallow. And you know, I never really understood what it was like to fight for something. In fact, even at that time, I was a good student, never really studied. So I never really succeeded. I knew it was going to be fine. Everything was going to work out, but I had to be willing to, I had to almost declare, this is what I want and I can deal with the consequences.
Almost like you had an epiphany.
Well, you know what it really was. And it was, and here's the interesting thing, right? You talk about wimps. The epiphany happened for me because my coach challenged me. And he challenged me in a way that most people today would look at and say, that's unfair. That was wrong. That was inappropriate. There was nothing wrong, inappropriate, or wrong about it. It was exactly what I needed. And it was in a game where I had a great success. And he said, look, if you walk the next guy, I'm taking you out of the game. And I did. And he took me out of the game. What was brilliant was my dad was also a college baseball player, and after the game, I walked up to him. He goes, what happened? Why'd you get taken out? I said, Coach told me not to walk the guy, and he'd take me out. And I thought my dad would say, God, that was a stupid coaching decision. My dad said something different, and I'm so thankful to this day for that. He goes, then be better. And that's changed me in that moment because instead of protecting and hoping for better outcomes, I had to be willing to fight for it. And we in our life, everything we do, we want stability and security in everything we do in our life. But the reality is we are unbelievably great in chaos. We want stability because it's easier. We want predictability. But you know what? What we're really good at is making the most out of where we are instead of having it perfect. And that's what I had to do. I had to be willing to say it. And then that just got me fired up about the mental side, the psychology of life. And I became a clinical psychologist, did my residency at Brown up in Rhode Island. And then I was like, look, there's something to this. And it just got me fired up. And it has put me on a mission for that life. That game in March of 1994 changed my life forever.
Well, congratulations. So let me ask you this question. We all know the world is changing. I mean, it's now changing at such high rates of speed. And a lot of people are so-called being left behind. We have artificial intelligence coming. We have what's called G5 coming. We have autonomous cars coming. Everything is changing. And so there's a lot of other people, even people successful today, who are going to be left behind. And the question is, how do these people adjust what you call the Mindset Manifesto? How does a person make that change to handle change?
Well, it's funny, right? We live in a world right now with more productivity. We have more technology. We have more success than we've ever seen in generations, and yet we have more people unhappy than we've ever had. It's the reason of two things. One is too many people feel like they're being played by the environment. They're being played by their life. They're not living their life because they don't truly know what they want. If you ask somebody, what do you want? Most people apologize for it. If somebody said, you know what I want? I want to have enough money to have a retirement and enjoy going to every one of my kids' sporting events. Wonderful. Because if you're willing to declare it, and that's where the manifesto part comes in. If you're willing to declare it, then you've got to get to work to achieve it. So many people are afraid.
So the first step, you've got to know what you want, because when I ask people, what do you want? They'll tell me what they don't want. Here's what I don't want, right. But they don't know what they do
100%.
want.
100%. You're exactly right. Most people are so afraid to admit, because what have we told people forever? Well, you really can't have that, or boy, that's a lofty goal. You know what? Just to you guys' point, if you don't tell me what you want, how do we know we ever succeed?
Right.
So what happens is we're telling people that it's harder than ever, but there are innovative people who will find solutions. There are ways around things. And so if you're willing to describe what you want and put it in vivid detail, there was a quote that we used to use every day in baseball at LSU, and it was a quote by Paul Mayer. And it was, anything that you ardently desire, sincerely believe in, vividly imagine, and enthusiastically act upon must come to pass. But most of us aren't willing to do that. We say we want it, but when we don't get it, we beat ourselves up, and then we blame our environment and our circumstances instead of making our circumstances better and building it. We may not get everything we want, but we're always going to be a lot better off fighting for what we want and waiting for the environment to give it to us.
So once again, it's Robert Kiyosaki, the Rich Dad Radio Show. Our guest today is Brett McCabe, his author of the book, The Mindset Manifesto. I'm getting that correct now. As an urgency to create a competitive mindset. And that's not to me, it's not a competitive mindset against somebody. It's a competitive mindset within yourself. Because I've met in my line of work, being a so-called money guru, which I'm not, I know I have my own problems. People say, how does it feel to be successful? I said, well, you have to know what unsuccessful feels like. And I have a lot of unsuccesses. When Kim met me, I was the most unsuccessful guy on planet Earth. I mean, your parents weren't too thrilled that you were going out with me, were you?
You were not their first choice. Let's just say that.
But Kim hung in there with me, and I think together we came out of some horrible, horrible financial setbacks, not by Kim's doings, but my own doings. I was down like $800,000 due to a loss of a business. And if I didn't change my mindset, I was never going to get out of $800,000.
Yeah.
You can't save your way out of $800,000.
No, it's just as Brett said. We weren't going to wait for somebody else to fix it for us. We knew it was up to us to fix it, and you had to fight for it. So I called the government and I asked for a handout. I didn't do that. So Brett, as a clinical psychologist, we all know that. Just go for what you want. The question is, why don't people go for what they want?
Because it's hard. There's a concept that I call
good answer.
There's a concept I call Suckville, and Suckville is where the
what is that? It's
clients,
called. What is it called?
Scottsdale.
It's called Suckville.
Suckville. Suckville. Got it.
Yes,
that's
right.
great.
And the reason is, if you ask people, if you walk up to somebody right now and you say, "Hey, how was your?" Well, it was this, right? We're so conditioned to see all the negatives we have.
Yeah.
And Suckville is that we're always falling short of our potential. Because what we do is we romanticize what this perfect scenario is. And when it gets hard, we get frustrated. Like, it shouldn't be that hard. I've seen so-and-so succeed. I've seen you guys write a bestseller. You never struggled? Come on. Who are you telling? That's a great story.
Never.
Never. But the suck is where you found genius. Because you got to work. And instead of complaining about what happened, you got motivated, you got purposeful, and
Wait. Say that one more time. When does a person find genius? That was genius, whatever you just said.
In the suck, where it's the hardest, where it's misery, where it's impatient, where you have your greatest doubt is where you find your genius.
That's like that old saying, it's not how many times you fall, it's how many times you stand up.
That's right.
And it's in that and for Kim and myself, the old saying, cheer up because it could get worse. So we cheered up and it got worse. Right, Kim?
Yeah, sometimes it did. And then it got better. And then it got
worse. And that's life.
But, and Brett, you talk. Go ahead.
Well, that's where genius is found.
Well, I was going to.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and I was going to say this too. Listen, I know that there are people who are really struggling out there who are listening to this. I know there are people wondering how to pay their bills. I know there are people out there who don't know if it can get any worse. And what I'm telling you is the person in the mirror can make a change. Your circumstances may not be fair compared to other people. I understand that. You may have had a different start line and you may have a different finish line. But you have to run the race you're on. And you have to look at the conditions that you have and find where you have the influence in your life and start building. It may not be romantic. You may not be on a private jet in 18 months. But you may create a better future that creates more happiness that can open up so many more doors. Don't feel beaten down. Find one piece, one little thing, even if it's a 1% change in your life. Make that change and start growing that success.
Excellent point. And Brett, you talk a lot about expectations. And when you talk about the private jet and, people see these .com people out of nowhere, all of a sudden they're billionaires. And you talk a lot about unrealistic expectations that people have. What do you mean by that?
Well, there was a study done years ago that looked at the financial literacy and the financial security of people who win the lottery. And if I'm not mistaken, it was like 85% of people who win a lottery in 7 years are back to their previous level of income because they blow the money because they didn't have to work for it. It just was given to them. And so what happens is we see the successes, right? We see the people. I had a player in my office earlier today and said, I'm 20-something years of age. I thought I'd be successful by now. And I thought to myself, my goodness, we used to define success in the 50s and 60s.
Yep.
Now it's got to be the 20s, right?
Yes.
And so that patience, but that grind of continuing to work to solve the puzzle of our experience is so important. And so the expectations is I expected to be there. Now I expect it based on what? You don't know the path you're on, and you don't know the challenges you have to face. Instead of trying to be this absolute romantic person all the time that's got every answer and is driving around on, in super exotic cars and taking videos on Instagram, work a second job, work extra hard, meet with your managers and learn how they train people and teach people and be in those experiences and absorb and gain wisdom versus short-term success. Wisdom is always, to me, that thing that has a lasting effect. Short-term success is often fleeting. So I want people to determine and create the right behaviors and habits that last over time versus the short-term relief or excitement that they feel.
So once again, before we go to break, Brett, I'm going to ask you to repeat that one more time. When does a person find their genius?
In the middle of the suck.
Those are just profound words of wisdom here. Profound. Those are the words of God.
We will be retweeting that.
That are the words of God there, ladies and gentlemen.
I love it. So
once again, it's Robert Kiyosaki, the Rich Dad Radio Show. We're talking to Brett McCabe. He's a sports psychologist, an athlete himself. He's the author of the book, The Mindset Manifesto, The Urgency to Create a Competitive Mindset. And for those of you who are in the middle of the suck, you might be close to your genius. We'll be right back. Welcome back, Robert Kiyosaki, the Rich Dad Radio Show, the good news and bad news about money. You can listen to the Rich Dad Radio program anytime, anywhere on iTunes or Android and YouTube. And please leave us a review wherever and whenever you listen to this program, because we need your feedback to improve what we do, even if it's Sucksville. And you can listen to our podcast. You can go to richdadradio.com. And if you have a question, you can use hashtag AskRichDad on social media. We'll do our best because it's our feedback that improves what we do for the people that listen to our program. So our guest today is Brett McCabe, and he's the author of the Mindset Manifesto, The Urgency to Create a Competitive Mindset. And his future bestseller is, what was it again, Kim?
It's called Break Free of Suckville. Coming out in March of 2020. Can't wait to get that book.
I know Suckville very well. I've been there many, many times. I mean, twice a day I visit the place. It's called Manic Depressive. I thought, why am I so screwed up? Why am I screwed up? Why am I not more successful? How come, all that stuff. I just one more thing. A lot of people say, well, when I get rich, then I'll be happy.
Yep.
So I got rich. I was still unhappy, Brett. What's wrong with that?
that's life, isn't it? I did a workshop.
Yeah,
I did a workshop last week.
One question I want to ask you about, because Kim brought it up. It's very important. You have guys like Zuckerberg and Bezos and all these guys. When I was a kid growing up in the 50s, there was this show called The Millionaire. Everybody was happy to be a millionaire, Today it's billionaire. And before it took you to 80 to become a millionaire, today, if you're not a billionaire by 29, you're in Suckville, right? I mean, that's the problem today.
Well, we get caught up comparing ourselves all the time, right? So Kylie Jenner is a billionaire, right? And so what do we say? Now that's the standard. I did a workshop recently where I had all my attendees write down what they were doing 5 years ago. And it was very interesting because I said, if you go back to yourself 5 years ago and you look forward to where you are now, you probably would have said 5 years ago, if you were in these shoes, you'd be so happy. And yet, if I asked them how happy they were, most of them they were still grinding. They were tired. They were exhausted. They were hardworking. There was pride about where they were, but they weren't, quote, happy. And that's where we get in trouble. When we define happiness and joy and pride by a certain status or a destination, we lose sight of what we're doing because we're always going to our reality is really good. But when we reject our reality, what we're doing is we're pushing our potential further and further away from us. So now, I had somebody tell me a long time ago, they said, look, if you want to feel, like you're not worthy, go buy yourself a new yacht and then take it to the Bahamas and look around and realize your yacht is a dinghy for somebody else. and that's what happens, right?
Yes. We compare ourselves to everybody. Yep.
Yeah. I want to write a book that gets the message out. Then all of a sudden I want to write a book that's a bestseller that puts me on that. Then I want to be the world expert. We're never happy. And that's just part of our human brain. Our brain is never content because if you think about what our brain's purpose is, it's to keep us alive. So If you walked around in a field way back when and were happy, you probably future lunch for a bear. But we have to be unhappy. So what we have to do is not allow the underlying wiring to derail us, and instead realize that we're never going to really feel content, but we can feel excited. We can feel empowered by the little growth that we make versus the big ones.
Good. So let me ask another question, because I have two. We're short on time, and I want to make sure that we get everything you want to say in here. How does a person get out of Suckville? That's number one. And number two is, I hear, and I'm not picking on the millennials because it's not an age thing. There's a lot of snowflakes out there. And I really don't know what a snowflake is, but the description, because I've been a snowflake many times. I'm just so burned out. I can't take anymore. And people hurt my feelings, and, now you can't say anything. You've got to have safe zones. And what the hell is going on? And then third thing is, why are people shooting everybody? What the hell's going on? I've never seen that. Before it was one guy yelling at somebody. Now they go out there, get their AK, and they shoot everybody. What the hell is going on? Brett, we need the answer now. We're in Suckville now.
Well, as a society, we're in it because we are conditioned to see everything as wrong. And that's what originally kind of started the manifesto idea, which was, listen, we can create our own reality, but we have to focus on what we want. And, if your listeners will go to brettmccabe.com and then /manifesto, those opportunities to start 2020 the right way on that landing page.
What is the manifesto? So what is the manifesto?
So the manifesto is the Mindside Manifesto. Listen, I want people to have a clear distinction of what they want to accomplish. If you want to break out of Suckville, tell me what you want and tell me how we're going to get there, and I will help you. I'll help anybody who wants to get there, just like you guys will. You provide unbelievable content, and your listeners are listening to this radio show and hearing unbelievable advice and guidance. You're not doing this by standing up on the rock and preaching to everybody. You're sharing your wisdom. People need to listen to this. You don't have to follow your path. You have to take bits of information and then start building your own path and saying, I know how these people succeeded. We're not going to see another Facebook. We're not going to see another Amazon, but we're going to see something new. We're going to see something unbelievable. If you think about Sarah Blakely, right? One of the first female billionaires, self-made. She took pantyhose and found a new way to do it.
Right.
Brilliant.
Right. Yeah.
Innovation isn't big. Innovation is the way we think. And we think by seeing different opportunities. It has to start with, what do you want? What are you willing to do?
I was going to say something about pantyhose, but I don't dare because I'm not politically correct these days. I can't even make a joke these days. What's going on, Brett? What's going on?
But why are we so offended? Here's why. Because of the Suckville that we're in, the misery that we're in. Instead of working out of it, I'd rather find other people who are consistent with me and agree that my life sucks because of something else. Instead of working our way out of it, instead of my grandfather having a fourth grade education and building homes in the heat in the summer in Cleveland, people today would rather find somebody else who's also unhappy and commiserate and say, you know what? I've been screwed over. I've been done wrong. Instead of building a better future, we'd rather complain about how our future is against us.
So
that's where our problem is.
So is that part of social media? People kind of get miserable together?
Yeah, it works. And social media is a very small representative of our society, but it has a very loud voice because we can highlight all the negatives. Think about it. You see people flying on the Christmas holidays, right? And what do we see? All the people whose flights have been delayed, and they're taking out their anger on social media versus looking at it going, I have no control. This sucks, but I can make the most of it.
What am I going to do about it?
I can relax. What am I going to do about it?
Yeah.
I can't control it.
Yep.
I can't control it. So I get on social media and I can tell you how bad my meal was. And somebody goes,
and you can do it anonymously. And you can do it anonymously. 100%. So nobody, yep. You don't even have to be responsible for any comments you make.
So Brett, why are these guys shooting everybody?
Well, I think there's two things. One is, I think we've got a lot of really, really unhappy people. I think it's a breakdown of the mental health system. I think it's access to dangerous weapons. But I think it's also a reflection of where the collective mindset is for a large group of people. And when we say large group, we're talking one-off here and there, but we're so aware of it. Think about it. When war happened back in the 40s or back in the 20s, it took a day or two for us to get the news. We have real-time news. If somebody's running from the cops right now, it's live on Twitter, and you can watch it. You don't see it. So access is higher, amplification is higher, and more attention is higher. And therefore, what you see is resources and opportunities for people who have bad intentions to act them out.
And this is why your book, The Mindside Manifesto, is so important, because it changes the mindset, starting with simple steps. So let me ask you this: is you work with so many top athletes, successful business people. What are one or two things that these people do every day that somebody could start doing today?
Man, what a great question. Here's the one thing that somebody told me that I thought was brilliant. Everybody wants to find their best today. And what happens is we want to be our best. But the best, by definition, is a once-in-a-lifetime experience. Instead of trying to be our best today, why don't we find the best that I have available to me today? That's what the best in the world do. They find what they have today, and instead of getting mad that they don't have whatever they thought they should have had, or believe that their practice prepared them for that, or it wasn't ideal, they found the best that was available to them that day. That's the number one thing. And the number two thing, and this is so important, the best of the best that I work with, they accurately review their progress and their performance. They're not afraid of honesty. They're willing to look and be critical, and they're willing to accept feedback. It's not personal to them. It's developmental, and that's the big difference.
So going back to personal, because we all have feelings and emotions. And I was listening to, I don't think his name was Ben, sure, I'm the wrong guy, but he was talking about what's going on in college campuses. They have to have safe rooms, and you can't have, I forget, what are some of those? You can't have thoughts and all this stuff.
People can't disagree with you.
You can't disagree and all this. And, I call that the snowflake syndrome. I have it too. When my feelings get hurt, and they do, I go nuts. I go like, oh, they're picking on me and all this stuff. How does a person prevent themselves from being the snowflake? How do you prevent you from letting the snowflake in you take over your life?
It's such a good question, and it's become this epidemic on college campuses because we want to protect our next generation. But what's going to happen when they go get feedback in the workplace? Yeah. There's not going to be a safe space and a therapy dog for them to pet because they were stressed.
Yes,
right?
Yes.
And so what we're doing is many times in the college campuses, it's a very small group that aligns with that mindset that's not in the real world. And I think we got to look at that distinction. Having spent many years in the academic setting, I'll tell you, it's not representative of the true world. Here's what we have to do as parents first. Parents is we don't have to be our kids' best friends, and we have to be willing to give them feedback and hold them to high demand. You have to start there. 2, you have to share with them when you struggle, what did you learn? It's not personal attacks on you. People are sharing their opinion with you, even if it's harsh, because they care about you, not because they worry that you're not going to like the feedback. And then the third thing to do in the workplace, where a lot of people feel that like they're struggling because they don't know how to manage this generation, is you have to tell them on the front end. You can't surprise them. They think it's going to be ideal. And what you have to tell them is, listen, I'm going to be a very demanding manager. I'm going to hold you to high demands, and I'm going to give you really regular feedback. And you're not going to like it. And so it may not be right for you. But eventually people will change those mindsets, and they grow up. They grow out of the snowflake. The Barney generation is what we call it in psychology.
The Barney?
Everybody, you love me. Yeah, the Barney. I love you. You love me. We're all a big, happy family. Yep. That's not representative of life.
I must have missed that generation.
So excellent. So Brett, going back to the things that people do every day, you say find the best they have available today. So what's an example of finding the best? I mean, let's say you go into work and you just feel like crap and you don't feel like you have a best.
Perfect. So you go into work, you got a big presentation at 2:00, you realize that you've been running late in traffic and you feel frazzled. Instead of thinking that today's not going to be a great day because something didn't go well, just take a 5-second step back and say, wait a minute, I still have the choice to give everything I have in that presentation, to be ready. See, we try to make everything all or nothing. It's all good or it's all bad. When in reality, it's in each individual moment that we can win. So if you can just be willing to accept the fact that today's, it's really okay to say today's a hard day. I'm having a really tough day. That doesn't mean I have to throw it all away. I can still make a choice to engage the next one. And I may not have my best mindset. But you know what's amazing? We don't need to be our best to be the best that we have. We can be at 80% and probably do really, really well. So most of the time what happens is we feel lost and we get mad about it, and we're frustrated, and we start trying to blame things or scenarios or whatever versus just going, look, I can grind. I can do this.
And you train a lot of professional golfers, and you use this example with golfers that they're not necessarily doing their best even when they win.
Nope. No, I had a player tell me he was at the Tour Championship last year, and he texted me after the round, and he said, Brett, I think I finally got what we're talking about. He said, I was on the 14th hole, and I was struggling. I was right around even par, but I just didn't have it. I looked at my caddy and said, this is what Brett's telling us. Doc is telling us just to do the best with what we got today instead of being mad that I don't have my best in the Tour Championship. And you know what he did? He wrote it down in his yardage book and said, let's play the last 5 holes purposeful. He shot 2 under, and he walked off and he texted me, said that was the best 2 under round I've ever shot. The next day he shot 9 under and almost won the tournament. See, you got to just stay in it instead of throwing everything away because it's not right, it's not good, I suck, versus I know it's hard. I'm having a tough day, but I can do this.
So let me ask.
And sometimes staying in the fight is the biggest thing.
Oh. So let's get, because we're more a money show here. What if you find, like when Kim and I got married, I was $800,000 down, and at that moment I realized getting a job wasn't going to solve the problem because I was basically a skipper of the Titanic at that moment. What do you say to people who think, and it's not the dollar amount, that $800,000 became the best thing ever happened to me because I couldn't get a job to solve the problem, but it was a big problem. So what do you say to somebody who's listening in at this moment who may be $100,000 down, they can't pay the medical bills, they can't put food on the table, they're about to lose their job or they've already lost their job? Because that's really where Suckville is. It's not in the dollar amount. It's wherever you think you are at that moment. So what do you say to that person at this moment, at this time? How do you get out of Suckville? How do you find your genius?
It's a great question. And you know what? It does suck there. I used to work and trained in a setting where we had people who, it was a charity hospital system, and a lot of their life experience in their life was really, really challenging. And there were still people who could find happiness, and they could still find a pathway. What I tell people who are there, and I saw that, and we had that in my family too. We got in a really bad spot when I was in high school. Is that you can dig yourself out, and the dig starts at each day putting the shovel in the ground and moving it. So if you feel like the entire world is collapsing on you, you got to find your one pathway out, and it may be just acknowledging that it's in a really bad spot, and I got to make some sacrifices, I got to make some choices, I got to make some decisions. And I got to do some things that aren't common. I got myself in this situation, whether I wanted to, or it was bad choices, or it was bad fortune and bad luck. But I can start building my way out. What happens is it's not going to do it overnight. You didn't get there overnight. So we have to start building a plan and stay with it. Be persistent and be driven, even when it gets hard, even when you lose that joy. The motivation will shift and the motivation will change, but you've got to stay with it. And you'll be amazing at what you create if you stick with it. And
that's exactly so true, because that's exactly what happened when Robert and I were in our Suckville and homeless and broke. And I was feeling sorry for myself, having big pity parties and woe is me, why is this happening to me? And then finally I realized I just had to go do something. I had to do something. And I just got up and I did something. I took some action. I got a decision. I got moving, and the moving started then the momentum. Yep. So it's exactly what you're saying, Brett. Exactly. So
once again, our guest today has been Brett McCabe. I really want to thank you. He's the author of the Mindside Manifesto, the urgency to create a competitive mindset. His website is brettmccabe.com.
And it's BHRETT, brettmccabe.com.
And so, Brett, thank you for your contribution. Thank you for tweeting and acknowledging source. I have no idea how tempting it is to say, well, I thought of that. Nobody will ever know. But isn't that true, Brett, if you cheat, lie, steal, and plagiarize?
Listen, you know what, 100%. You know what, also, if I'm tweeting out financial advice, and my wife wrote it, because thank God I married my wife, because she's our financial genius now. I know where I'm smart and where I'm not. So thank you.
Well, thank you for sharing your genius with everybody. It's so important, and I can't wait for your new book coming out in March, Break Free of Suckville. That's going to be great.
So before we end the Rich Dad Radio Show, I want to thank this is how Kim and I get out of Suckville, because if you're married, you know what Suckville feels like.
Hey.
Because, I think the biggest lie ever told was, and they lived happily ever after again. I mean, that's got to be the biggest pile of BS I've ever heard, because marriage means a partnership, things like this. But the one thing that Kim has always taught me, she says, choose happy. So when I'm in the middle of my Suckville, I can hear her words, choose happy. And at that moment, it is a mind-side change. Because when you're in the middle of Suckville, you can't see happy. Right, Kim?
That's correct. That's correct. And it is. It's just a choice. It's a decision. It's a choice you can make at any moment. And I just have to, it's an awareness to say, oh my God, look at where my mind is going. I'm getting very, very negative. Okay, so what can I do now differently? What can I choose at this moment? And I like to choose happy.
And there's one more thing I'd like to say to people is that, when you're climbing the mountain, there's always another mountain. And you can choose to climb it or not climb it. That is the biggest difference in life. And I think a lot of people choose not to climb, which is their choice. But I think being, by star signs and Aries, I like to climb. And so that's why I'm always in Suckville anyway. I get up to the top and then I want to do something else.
Yep.
Right?
Yes, and I like what Brett said. He said the two things you can do. Number one is what do you want? But number two is then what are you willing to do? A lot of people say, oh, I want this, but they're not willing to do what it takes to get there. And that to me is the key. What are you willing to do?
And I think one of the most important things is it just starts in your head. You have the power over your thoughts at that moment. So I'm going to commend my sweetheart, Kim. Choose happy, which is one of the hardest things to do when you're in the middle of Suckville. So anyway, thank you all for listening to the Rich Dad Radio Show, and we'll be coming to you with another very interesting program. Right, Kim?
Yes, we will. Thank you for listening.
And you can remember to send your questions to use hashtag AskRichDad on social media. I'm learning how to say these words because I'm an old guy.
Use hashtag AskRichDad on social media.
And I still have a transistor radio. People don't know what those are anymore.
And we'd also love you to leave us a review. Wherever you listen to our show, leave a review because that's how we get better.
Right. And we have, I want to make some announcements. I'm very happy is because we have on YouTube channel now, we have Rich Dad's Millennial Money. Because we have so many millennials asking me questions because, they are being screwed. Our school system teaches them nothing about money. They, if mommy and daddy are rich, mommy and daddy are bribing Harvard or Yale to get you into the best school. I mean, that is corruption at the highest of levels. I mean, my friend lives next door. I won't mention her name, but she's one of those Hollywood stars. And she got caught bribing USC, University of Southern California, for a daughter to get into school. That's pretty bad when you got to use your money to bribe USC. You know who graduated from USC? O.J. Simpson. I mean, geez, if you have to bribe somebody to get into USC, what's wrong with that? But the rich are now using their money to bribe so their kids can get into the best schools. And meanwhile, the kids from middle-class families are coming out loaded with student loan debt. What has happened to our society and education? It is corrupt. They should be shot at dawn. I mean, what the heck are we doing to our young people? If you don't have money, they send you to school and you get into the student loan debt. You're signing contracts that I wouldn't sign for student loan debt. What has happened to our society? So our little YouTube channel with Alexandra Gonzalez, she's a millennial. It's called Millennial Money, and she gets to interview old guys like me about money. And then we just started a new one with our personal assistant, Christina. And she says, because people always ask me, how'd you get started? How'd you get started? So we have a new YouTube channel with Christina called How I Get Started. And she interviewed people who have started their businesses. So Rich Dad is doing our best to bring you what you need to know. So once again, that's what we do here. So please go to hashtag AskRobert at RichDad on social media, whatever you guys use, because I don't know what you guys are using anymore. And tell us what you want to know and all that. Give us a feedback. Sarah, any comments? Because Sarah is our producer here.
Thank you, Robert. I think it's going great. I'm excited for the new YouTube show, How I Got Started.
How I Got Started,
We did 2 interviews yesterday, and Christina's a natural. I think you might want to give her a raise because she's going to find her calling, hosting shows. No,
hey, I don't work for
Okay,
money.
we're pulling her off there right now. Pulling her off
no,
there.
she did great. The guests were amazing. So I'm super excited about what we're doing here. And really, I love all the free education we're offering. You guys offer so much. So super excited for what's happening in 2020 for us.
So we're using social media for the good, and people are using social media to vent their wimpy, snowflake, loser attitudes. Your choice of which YouTube channel you tune into. Final words, Kim.
Well, I just want to thank everybody for listening. Keep listening. Go to YouTube. hashtag AskRichDad on social media for your questions. We appreciate all the feedback. We appreciate all the listeners, and we travel all over the world, and it's great when people come up and say, oh, I heard your podcast. I heard your podcast. We love that. So thank you for listening, and thank you all for
Kim and I was
tuning
just in
in.
Slovakia and Budapest, and I was in Italy, and people kept coming up saying we listen to Rich Dad Radio and the YouTube channel and all this, because that's what we're here for. Money is important, but serving our community is more important. So thank you all for being part of the Rich Dad family.
Mùa lụt nước